The election that brought me to national politics was a referendum in 1988 on the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. So political rhetoric around trade agreements is something that I'm very familiar with. And, you know, it's really a perfect storm of politics. You have your midterm elections, and remember, 35 states for whom Canada is the largest trading partner. They've got members of Congress, they've got local state legislatures, governors all up for election. So there's going to be a lot of political pressure to make that deal work. Canada has an election in 2019, but Quebec, which is the most fervent supporters of supply management, is having an election next month. Of course, the Mexican president's going to be out, so we have to accommodate him. So lots of political stuff in the mix. I was more heartened by the statement Friday when the president referred NAFTA, the Mexican-American part of it, to Congress with the idea that Canada would join in. And we start negotiations again tomorrow. So when we first made the date to talk today, we thought we might have something more concrete. But I think, maybe just because I'm a Canadian, but I'm optimistic. And I know how important the agreement is. So they're negotiating in good faith. They'll start tomorrow. And I quite believe that there will be a tripartite NAFTA, because I think it's the only kind there can be.
One of the big sticking points has been Chapter 19. It's the dispute resolution mechanism, which was actually a sticking point 25 years ago when the original NAFTA was agreed upon as well. Is it worth fighting for? It seems to be a big issue for Canada.
Well, it's interesting because there's a debate in Canada about that, and I've seen commentators say both. They say we aren't really using it that much the last 10 years. It was quite important the first 15 years of the agreement. So I think that it's not necessarily a disaster. I think Canada, in the sort of the belt and suspenders theory of protection against trade disputes, would like to still have it. So they'll be pushing for it, but it may be a bargaining chip that could be traded away for something else. So it's not I don't think that's a do or die. I think we prefer to keep it, but I don't think it's the end of the world if it's not there.
If it does get blown up, what do auto tariffs do to Canada?
Well, yeah, it's terrible for us.
But is the country ready for it?
Well, is any country ever ready for it? We'll make do. First of all, because if NAFTA is canceled, and remember Congress has to do it, it takes some time for that to go in. But it's interesting. People make these threats, and then they discover later that they're shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, even the auto agreement between the United States and Mexico, it's going to increase auto prices in the United States. It's not at all clear it's going to have the effect. I mean, we don't care. We're a high-wage country. And we have a good integrated industry. So I think you have to kind of follow the dots. And I mean, you guys do this when you're in your analyses. You don't just look at the superficial.
We've seen what's happened to lumber over the past few months. It doesn't seem to have altered the trajectory of trade strategy.
And again, what happens is that when the United States goes after our softwood lumber, the American housing industry suffers, and and housing starts go down. So all of these things have consequences. And the thing that I learned when I was running to defend the Canada-U.S. agreement is that a lot of stuff about trade is counterintuitive. We think we know, it's sort of obvious, like a trade surplus is good or a trade surplus is bad. It's actually more complicated than that, and you really have to follow the steps that are going to happen when you introduce certain provisions. And sometimes you find out that it's not what you think.
How closely are Canadian politicians and trade negotiators watching U.S. midterms? You mentioned the local and state
very closely
impacts.
And it's interesting, we have very good cross-border relationships, not just between the national level, but between our provincial governments and state governments. And so there's a lot of conversation. So they're very connected and very concerned, because the great thing is that the NAFTA, even going back to the Canada-U.S. agreement, has been really positive. And what it does is it enables us to rationalize production on both sides of the border to make products more competitive outside North America. So there's a lot of conversation. They're following it very closely, and you never know. But I'm optimistic that cool heads will prevail and interest will prevail, because there's nobody's interest to blow this up.